We are.
Oh, great. Okay, well, here we are, Bible Study Hub. I'm going to pop up our little question of the night. We always have a bit of a delay. And we know that you might be watching this back later on Facebook or YouTube. This is the live version, unedited. So if you want to skip ahead about 5 minutes, that will help you skip over just the everybody's gathering and saying hello part. If you like that part, hang with us and you can do it on the playback. But you might want to just skip ahead. So anyway, we should be getting some people joining us here shortly, hopefully. I see we've got one person watching.
Oh, there we go. There's Susie. Hello, friends. Hello, Susie.
Susie's saying hi. Dottie is saying hi.
Hello, Dottie.
Hi to both of you. Well, welcome on in. I'm Ann, and this is Emily, and we're doing Bible Study Hub in John chapter 6 tonight. But while we gather, we'll start right like at just 9 o'clock sharp Eastern time. But we always like to put up a fun little, nothing question just to have some interaction. So the question of the night is, what is something that you like to do on a dark, rainy day? Is there just something special that you like to do to pass the time? Probably not go for a walk, or swim, but I don't know, maybe you do like that. Shireen is saying hello. Nice to see you, Shireen.
Hello, Shireen.
Always good to have you here. So you all can comment while we gather. And don't worry, we will get started at 9. We're just taking a couple minutes here prior to the start to just gather along and get everybody in. But do feel free to comment, whether you're watching from Facebook or YouTube. That's it. If you don't comment, we'll just sit here and stay.
Comment and C's here.
That's what we're hoping for. Carolyn is saying hello. Hi.
Carolyn.
Good to see you. Oh, we just now went live on YouTube. We have a
Hi, Susan.
huge delay.
Susan's
yeah.
a special friend of mine.
Oh,
Thank
look
you
at
for being
this.
here, Susan.
Susan, how nice to meet you.
Yay.
I'm so glad that you're
Tell
here.
Dan about you.
Oh, yes. Yep. She was texting away and I told me she was texting you. So thanks for joining us. Susie is saying in response to the question, if it's chilly, she makes soup.
Oh, I hope you like to have friends over then on those days.
I want to know what kind of soup you want to make because now I'm feeling hungry for soup. Robin says hello. Hi to you.
Robin.
And Dottie is saying she likes to snuggle under a blanket with a good book and a cup of tea.
Sounds delightful.
That does sound delightful. How come I didn't do any of this stuff today on our cold rainy day? I didn't do anything fun.
Because we probably ran around crazy all day.
Yeah, that's probably true. Carolyn has said she likes to sleep or read. Carolyn doesn't get too many chilly, rainy days where you are in Phoenix. Shireen says maybe some, candles. I thought it said candies. I obviously need to put my glasses on.
Pop rocks.
Yeah, I light those things up. Light candles and snuggle with coffee or hot chocolate
Yay.
and a book.
Delightful.
That does sound nice. We did have a rainy day here today. Did you do anything fun?
I didn't do anything fun. Usually I love to lay in bed and listen to the rain. I have
That
a little
is nice.
skylight in my bathroom that's kind of close to my bed. So I love to hear it and I love to just be thankful that I'm warm and dry and it's so cold. It won't be especially when it's cold.
That always feels
Didn't
good.
do that today though.
No, some days just doesn't lend itself to
Yeah.
that nice weather.
Yeah.
Yeah, when the kids were little and we did live in Arizona, if we did get that occasional cloudy, rainy day, we would bake cookies. Like we always did that. It just
Aw.
felt right. But now they're gone and it rains every day. So I gotta put the brakes on that. All right, what time is it? We've still got like a minute left. Anybody else want to answer our question of the night? Thanks for joining us, by the way. I can see people joining. I can't see who you are unless you tell me, but I have a little number that I can see. So very glad to have you all and hoping that a few more people will join. It's such a great study.
What about you? Cool. What do you like to do?
Oh, now? Like, now that I don't bake cookies? I like to just, I have to have some lights on in the house so it doesn't feel really depressing.
Uh-huh.
And then I usually do some cleaning, fun stuff like that. Study for Bible Study Hub. I guess it's like every other day for me. I guess I didn't do very well with my own question. Oh well. Anyway, well, let me pop this down. Whoops, watch, that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry about that. That's what I wanted to do. And I will run over here and I'm going to give you the quickest little tiny itty bitty countdown, but it just helps for editing purposes to have a nice hard break. So I'll see you back in about 5 seconds. to Bible Study Hub. I am so happy to have you here tonight. I'm Anne, and this is my dear friend Emily.
Hello.
And so we're going to be walking with you through the book of John as we continue our study in the Gospel of John tonight. And buckle your seatbelt because tonight's study just blew my mind. It's still kind of mind-blowing. In fact, I hope we can teach it. It's so much information, but I hope it will bless you the way it has blessed the two of us so far. So we would love to just kind of get a running start here, just in case you need this. If you want to comment and you want your name to appear and you're doing this through Facebook, you just have to go to streamyard.com/Facebook, give it permission, your name will appear. Otherwise, it'll say something like Facebook user, which is fine if you want to be anonymous, but that's how you get your name to show up. So let's catch up from last week. Now, you were working last week, so you were able to join me.
Yeah.
But do you want to give us the running start?
Do you want to?
I will do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't teach it.
All right, no problem. So last week we covered the story in John chapter 6 of Jesus feeding the multitude. There were 5,000 men on the hillside, plus women and children. So we just said, how many people did he feed? I mean, was it 15,000, 20, 25? How many were there? A lot. So he takes the little bread and loaf, or the loaves and the fish, I should say, from the little boy, and he multiplies it to the point that they eat until they're stuffed, which did not happen often in this day. I mean, the stuffed part, because it was hard to get food. And they were always kind of hungry, and they were always trying to figure out what the next meal was going to be or where they would get it from. So the fact that they were able to just sit down to a banquet and eat until they were full, they loved that. In fact, they loved it a little too much, as we'll find out next week. And now they're like, we're in this for the food. But anyway, so Jesus does that for them. And then what ends up happening, unfortunately, is that they decide that because Jesus is the Messiah, I mean, he's claiming to be, he's now done this amazing miracle, and he's provided food for them. They're like, you know what? Let's just make him the king. But Jesus isn't ready to be the king yet. It's not time for that. And so they decide, we'll just force him to be the king. We'll have a coup, we'll crown him king, we'll shove him into the arena, and that'll be it. And that'll be just great. But it wasn't time. So where we're picking up tonight is kind of on the heels of that story. And we want to go ahead and just kind of continue on in our study. Before we get going, though, in John chapter 6, one other little thing. This story that we're going to cover tonight, and this is Jesus walking on the water, so you might be familiar with it, is also recorded in 2 of the other Gospels. So there's 4 Gospels. 3 of them have this story. John, obviously, Mark, and Matthew. Luke doesn't touch this one. And I wanted to say this. We didn't even talk about this, so I'm springing this on Emily. But if you ever are a witness to, say, just for instance, a traffic accident, and there are other people who have also seen the accident, they're giving their reports to the police. If every single person, say there's 3 witnesses, they all said exactly the identical same thing, the police would be like, what's going on
A little
here?
concocted.
Yeah, this sounds contrived to me. How did you all come up with exactly the same testimony? You would expect not contradictions, but different perspectives. And so one person might say, I saw the person, they were texting while they were driving and they went right through that red light. And another might say they were driving like twice the speed limit when they went right through the red light. Well, that's not contradictory.
It's just different points of view. It's just different. And in science, there's a term for that.
Oh.
It's parallax. When you focus on something from different angles and you see things differently, and scientists accept it as truth because it really is the way it is. So if you're reading like a thermometer, if you and I shared a thermometer, you would see it from this angle and I would see it from this angle. We would see different numbers.
I did not know any of that.
So
that's so cool.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
yay.
So the same is true in the Bible.
Exactly.
Just a little bit different perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to read the account in John, and then we're going to kind of flip over to Mark for the most part. We're going to hit Matthew just a tiny bit at the end, and we're going to let that kind of put the whole picture together, again, like you would do if you had multiple witnesses to something that was going on. So why don't you turn to John chapter 6, and we will pick up tonight in verses 15 to 21. I just skipped over loads of my notes. So it took me a second. Sorry. All right. So let me read this here and I'll pop it up on the screen. I'm reading from the Legacy Standard Bible, but you can read from any version that you want. It'll be very similar. And this is what it says. So Jesus, knowing that they were going to come and take him by force to make him king, withdrew again to the mountain by himself alone. Now when evening came, the disciples went down to the sea, and after getting into a boat, they began to cross the sea to Capernaum. It had already become dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. Verse 18. And the sea was stirred up because of a strong wind blowing. Then, when they had rowed about 25 or 30 stadia, we'll find out from Mark that's like the middle of the lake, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing near to the boat, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." So they were willing to receive him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. Wow. So John starts the story here, as he tends to do. Very straightforward, very just matter of fact, not a lot of hoopla, not a lot of emotion, just the facts. And so you kind of just get that. If you are wondering, by the way, and we were talking about this earlier, was this where Peter gets out of the boat?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is.
Peter does get out of the boat, but John doesn't speak to that detail.
Neither does Mark. But if you do want, and so we're not actually going to cover that part tonight. We both thought we were going to, and then God kind of just moved us in a different direction. But in Matthew 14, 26 to 33, if you want to read the account about Peter, you can definitely do that on your own. So for the purposes tonight, we're going to synthesize kind of John and Mark's gospel, and then we're going to get a fuller picture of what is going on. Because there are parts that even just culturally we're going to miss if we're not delving in deep, or even language-wise that we might not pick up. So we're going to try to dig down deep on this, and I think it's going to be really, really helpful. Emily, would you talk to us a little bit about how educated, like the common Jewish person would have been back then?
They were very educated. This was a very educated society. These were people who followed the rules of the Sabbath to their law. These were people who understood the Old Testament, read the Old Testament, and most likely memorized long passages of it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of references within Scripture that they would understand culturally, like that they would pick up that we might not know. I certainly wouldn't know, a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they were experts in the Old Testament. This is what they studied all the time. So as Mark gives us his account, he is adding details to his Jewish audience that they are going to absolutely pick up, but that people like us, it might go right over our head just simply because we're not as invested maybe in knowing the details of the Old Testament. So that's where we're going to start now. So you can turn, if you would like, to Mark chapter 6. It just happens to line up at the same chapter number as John's does. That doesn't always happen, but it does tonight. And we're just going to take verses 45 and 46 to start. So Mark 6, 45 and 46. Same account, slightly different perspective. And immediately Jesus made his disciples get into a boat and go ahead of him to the other side to Bethsaida, while he himself was sending the crowd away. And after bidding them farewell, he left for the mountain to pray. So let's just start first by just noting he made his disciples leave.
Yeah.
John doesn't say that.
No, he doesn't say they're sent away.
No.
Yeah.
But and you want to say anything about like why that would have been there?
I think that the disciples really got wrapped up. I think the crowd mentality, they had provision for their physical needs, to have all of the bread and all of the fish that they could want. This was a big event. They need to have that. So they were all whipped up into a frenzy.
Yeah.
And even the disciples. And Jesus, I think, he realized that they missed what was most important. It wasn't the physical provision, it was the spiritual provision that they missed. And I think it hurt him. I think that's hard for him
to
to see that.
He just had to step in and get her fixed. I mean, if there's a coup right now, Rome is going to descend on them, and it's going to be just a bloodbath. It's going to be bad. So Jesus knows this. He also knows it's not his time for the kingdom. He's got to die first, and so he's got to fix this thing. So crowd, get out. Disciples, get in the boat. And then he goes to the mountain to pray
By himself.
Yeah, you
Yes.
just had such a good insight into
I
that.
just love this. I love that he sent everyone away and he went by himself to be in relation with his Father, to worship because he needed it, to worship and to pray with his Father. And I love this. If you ever have the chance to pray in complete solitude, I just think it's the best. It's the best kind of prayer there is. A lot of times I'll pray in the car, or I'll pray at night, or I'll pray when I'm cooking dinner, but when you have that solitude, and I think Jesus really needed his Father.
Oh,
to do that.
clearly. Yeah, and if he needed to do that, how much more do we need to do that? And I need to do a better job at just carving out specific prayer time. Because like you said, I'm talking to the Lord like 24/7. But there is something better about that intentional time.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too.
We probably can all improve in that. And then one other little note here before we go on. He puts his disciples in a boat and sends them off right into a storm. They didn't sign up for that. They didn't know when they got in the boat. Now, if you're wondering, like, didn't they look around and be like, wow, it looks like it might rain? This is an area that to this day, because of the terrain, gets these incredibly bad storms, like fast. And obviously they don't have radar or Doppler or anything, so they can't really predict what's going to happen, but it's kind of in a bowl with mountains around it. So you've got the mountain air, which is going to be cold and crisp and dry. And then you've got the warm sea down here with the hot vapor, And so you have these air currents colliding with the cold and the dry and the warm and the moist. And it just turns into like these cyclones. And so they start out and it's fine. And then they get out to about the middle and this thing hits. And when it says that they were rowing, like painfully rowing, they're just trying to go somewhere. But you can imagine, I mean, it's a pretty primitive boat and they don't have a motor. So they're just with all their might, they're rowing and it is not going well. So Jesus is off praying. They're in this boat trying to, not die. And we'll move on now to verses 47 to 52. And when it was evening, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone, Jesus, on the land. And seeing them straining at the oars, and that word straining entails, like I said, like pain, like it was hurting them. They were trying so hard, these guys, for so long. About the fourth watch of the night, this would be maybe like 3 a.m. to 6 a.m.-ish, that hour, he came to them, Jesus did, walking on the sea, and he was intending to pass by them. That phrase, he was intending to pass by them, is going to be really important in a minute. So if you underline or you highlight in your Bible, go ahead and mark that. We'll come back to that in a second. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought that it was a ghost and cried out. So they're screaming, these guys are, for they all saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke with them and said to them, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." Then he got into the boat with them, and the wind stopped, and they were utterly amazed, for they had not gained any insight about the loaves, but their heart was hardened. What that's saying is what we just said a minute ago. With the loaves, they didn't have any insight as to like, this is Jesus being God and being your spiritual food as well. They just got all sucked into the whole frenzy of the thing, as Emily said. And their hearts were hardened that they didn't want to not be sucked in. They were enjoying this. Yeah. They were hoping this would go somewhere. And it didn't. So talk to us a little bit about like the sea and what the sea would have meant or been like for the Jewish people.
Yeah, so the sea is huge. When I think of an inland sea, I don't think of it as vast as it really was. One place where I was studying, somebody said it's almost like he was there, and he said he felt like he was on the shore, like the Atlantic shore. It's just so big. But there are people who use the sea to survive. They fish there, but they didn't love the water. They didn't enjoy the water. They were not going swimming and going to the beach. They kind of had a fear of the water, probably a healthy fear,
Yeah.
given the storms
True.
at the Sea of Galilee. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they sure did. Drowning was considered the worst way to die in their minds. So not huge fans of the water. And there were a lot of superstitions about all of that as well.
Uh-huh.
So when Jesus comes walking out on the water, they didn't know if it was a ghost. That you can also translate that word demon. I mean, they just didn't know. And it scared them so bad. Here's 12 big, burly fishermen, yeah, and they are terrorized and screaming for their lives. And you can just picture this scene. Oh my goodness, amazing. Well, let's get to the part that I told you to underline and highlight, because now we're going to really dig in. So stay with me. This is going to be worth it if you make it to the end. Don't leave me, please. Here we go. There is a famous Old Testament story. In fact, it's in the book of Exodus. We didn't quite get to it when we were doing Exodus because we kind of stopped and went over to John for a bit. But there is a point where Moses goes to God, and this is in Exodus 33, if you want to read it on your own. And he says, I just want to see your glory. And God says, yeah, no. I show you my glory, you die. So that's not a good idea. And so Moses kind of keeps going back and forth with God. And finally, God kind of relents and says, okay, I'm going to make this work for you, but you're not going to see my face. I'm going to pass by you. And so actually, I said you could read it on your own. Let me just read a little bit of the story. There's more to it than this, but this will give you an idea. In Exodus 33, 20 to 23, God says, you cannot see my face, for no man can see me and live. Then Yahweh said, behold, there is a place by me, and you shall stand there on the rock. So picture Moses on the rock. And it will come about while my glory is passing by, so here he goes, he's going to pass by, that I will put you in the cleft of the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen. So God was known to pass by. Now, this is a story that these disciples would 100% have known, probably memorized. So when Jesus comes walking on the water, I mean, you would think he would walk to the boat.
To them, yeah.
But he intends to pass them by. Now, if you're saying, okay, I mean, maybe it's kind of a stretch, don't you think? Yes, if that were it, but it's not all. There's more. So let's keep going. Also, a very famous book, the book of Job, that they would have definitely known, studied, read. Job 9:11 says, were he, this is speaking of God, to sweep by me or pass by me, I would not see him. Were he to move past me, I would not perceive him. So there is this concept of God passing by. So you kind of envision this. You see the guys in the boat. Here comes Jesus walking on the water, but not to them, past them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if that was enough to, like click in their minds right at that moment, but that's not all. There's more. There's more going on. So if you go back to Mark 6, verse 49a, it says, but when they saw him walking on the sea. Okay, we got it. That's the key part of this whole thing. Well, there's another Old Testament passage that would likely have come to their mind, and it's from the same book, Job, and the same chapter 9, but a few verses before, which speaks of God treading on the waves of the sea, literally God walking on the water. And so let's read it, Job 9:8, and this is what it says. Speaking of God, who alone stretches out the heavens and tramples down the waves of the sea, which is a fancy way of saying who walks on water. Not just walks on water, but like owns it. He tramples those waves down. So here we have God literally pictured as walking on the water. But that's not all. There's more. If you go to Isaiah, another very familiar book to them, loads of stuff in Isaiah that they would have been familiar with. Isaiah 43:2 says this, when you, speaking of like us, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the river, they will not overflow you. So this is a picture of God saying, when you are in the midst of the storm, I'm there with you. So now we have Jesus passing by, reminiscent of God passing by. We have Jesus trampling the waves.
Mhm.
God tramples the waves. And then what we were just reading, that he will be there and take care of them, and Jesus gets into the boat with them. So you can kind of see how Jesus is setting this up, not just to impress them, not just to show them a miracle. It's a very different miracle than his other ones.
Yeah,
His
yeah.
other ones involve healing people, feeding people, raising people from the dead, helping people, all those things. This doesn't look like any of them.
No, I think he really chose this. I think he and his father on the mountain chose this because it was meeting them where they were. It was speaking to them in their language to make it clear to them, clear
Yes.
as a bell to them.
Yes. And he is so good at that, at using pictures to communicate. He uses stories and visuals. And I mean, you talk about the master teacher. If you ever just want to do just a little like on your own study, look for how Jesus communicates. It is beyond brilliant. Like none of us could ever
I
come
love
close.
his analogies, how he uses our physical world that we can kind of understand to really bring what we can't understand down to our level. It's amazing.
It is truly incredible. Only God can do that. Well, that would be enough to convince me, but there's more. There's one more and I almost missed this. Like I thought I was done with my notes and I thought, oh no, I just missed something else. So we're going to look at that. Back to John, since that's technically, I think, what we're supposed to be studying tonight. In John 6:20, it says, but he said to them, it is I, do not be afraid. But here's the thing, and I always just assumed he was like, hey, it's me, it's Jesus. You don't have to be afraid. I'm not a ghost. But that's not what he's saying.
No, he said, I am. When I was reading about the Gospel of John before I started reading the Gospel of John, I read that there were 7, I think, I am statements.
Yes.
7 I am, and this is it's kind of germane to who he is. And my English Standard Version said something a little more casual, like it is me instead of I. It wasn't the perfect translation.
Right.
It didn't say I am, but the perfect translation here is one of the I am statements.
Yeah.
Why does he do that?
Right. So that is a good question, and you might be going, okay. I think that's significant. I have no idea why. Well, let us tell you why. Because way back again in Exodus, by the way, are you catching how important it is to know the Old Testament? I just have to throw this in.
Yes.
There's a pastor, I'm just going to say his name, it's Andy Stanley, very popular, who has made the statement in the last few years of we need to unhitch ourselves, I think is how he put it, from the Old Testament. Like, we don't need it. No, that is so not true. We absolutely need it. You don't have the Old Testament, I'm sorry, but you're going to miss loads of stuff in the New Testament. It's so important. Didn't mean to digress. Didn't think I was going to say that. Try not to.
Had to.
I just lost it. So I had to say it. But anyway, it's so important to know this. So back to Exodus again, and maybe if you were with us when we studied Exodus, you remember the story. Moses in the burning bush, and God is saying, I want you to go to Pharaoh and tell him, let my people go, and you're going to lead my people out. And Moses is just like, I don't think so.
He's in a position.
Get somebody else.
Yeah.
And so he kind of goes back and forth with God. But finally he says, okay, when I go to Pharaoh and I tell him, you said let the people go, I mean, who am I supposed to say said that? He didn't even know God's name. Like he didn't know exactly who he was talking to. And God said, you tell him, I am sent you. Gives me goosebumps. Yes. He explains who he is, not by a noun, not by an adjective, but by a verb tense. And you were kind of even commenting on that.
It's all verb tenses. I am is the past, the present, and the future. It's all of the tenses.
It's everything. So when Jesus said, I am, believe me,
Oh, they got it.
nobody missed that.
No one missed that.
The religious leaders go rabid wild when he says that because they know he's claiming to be God.
Can you imagine the disciples in the boat as they each start to pick up these little pieces about the trampling the waves and how they must have been, as they're getting it. And then he says, I am. Like, they're not going to miss it.
No. Yeah. Well, and that is the question. Did they get it? I mean, John doesn't tell us, and Mark doesn't really tell us, but Matthew to the rescue. Thank you,
Yay.
Matthew, because Matthew does tell us. So we're going to hop over to Matthew. I'm making you jump all over the place tonight. Thank you for your
This
patience.
is why it's nice to have an and to do this.
That's why I like the internet because I can just type it in and pull it up. Matthew 14:32-33. Listen to what Matthew tells us happens at the very end of this story. This is after Peter and Jesus are on the water together. So when you see plural, it's talking about the two of them getting back in the boat. Here's what he says. He says, and when they, Jesus and Peter, got into the boat, the wind stopped. And those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, you are truly God's son. So did they get it? They got
Chill bumps. Thank God that's chills right there.
and they worship him. Now, let me just say this because I know that we have some people watching who have been brought up in, and maybe even currently are in a religious system that denies that Jesus is God. And you have some scriptures that you can pick out and kind of try to, shore that up. Here's what I just want you to hear me say. It's not about who's winning, who's right, who's wrong, which group is the winner here. That doesn't matter at all. Your eternity is on the line. And someday you will stand before God all by yourself. That goes for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
You won't have your religious group around you. You won't have your church around you. It'll be you and you alone. And it really, really matters that you got Jesus right. Here they worship him. If he's not God, what is his main responsibility at this moment? Stop. Don't do that. If somebody were to bow down and worship you, what would you do? Would you accept it?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Mm-mm.
None of us would do that. We would say, what are you thinking? Get up, get up. Do you want us both to get struck by lightning? I mean, what are you thinking?
Right.
Even John, the author of this book in Revelation, has an angel interacting with him, and John falls down and starts to worship John. The angel, like he just loses it. You can only imagine. He's just so confused at this moment. He starts to worship the angel, and the angel, an angelic being, says, get up. Don't do that. Only worship God. It would have been Jesus's responsibility to do that. He doesn't. He accepts the worship because he's God. He just showed them that. Do you understand that? Do you grasp that? If you're wrestling with that, please keep wrestling and do this for me. Pray to God and just say, Lord, if Jesus really is God, will you open my eyes to this? Will you show me? Will you lead me without a shadow of a doubt? I really want to know. And he is faithful and kind and gracious and compassionate, and I believe he will continue to bring you down that path. But to end up tonight, as we were talking this afternoon, I just love how you kind of landed this plane. And I just said, Emily, would you just end it tonight with what you just told me?
I love how the bread and the loaves and the fish and Jesus walking on water kind of works together, because Jesus, the crowd and the disciples missed the provision, the spiritual provision that Jesus is giving. And they just missed it. They got the physical provision, and they should have gotten the spiritual. I mean, bread was kind of synonymous with life, and fish was, in the Jewish culture, kind of attached to blessing.
Mm-hmm.
So they really should have gotten that, and they missed it, but they got it here. They stumbled. They didn't fall. They stumbled. And these are the disciples. These are the disciples that were with Jesus. So we're going to stumble. I stumble
Me too.
all the time. I
Every
stumble
day.
all the time, and it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Isn't that nice?
Don't fall away, but you can stumble.
It's just nice to know, even when we were talking earlier, and you said a long time ago, and I said, oh, I'm such a sinner. And then you said you were thinking, no, you're not. Like, oh, yeah, no, if you get to know me too much, you'll be like, okay, never mind. Yeah, you are. I just feel like every day it's just such a struggle,
It is such a struggle it's just,
For all
you
of us.
can't ever win that.
And nobody is above that. There's nobody who's like, well, thank goodness, I used to sin, but now I don't. If they say that, they just lied and now they're right back.
I was just going to say, that's just lying.
That's
It's
right.
a sin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just love how you kind of just brought that all kind of full circle where they started out, it wasn't going well, and they got in the boat, it really wasn't going well. But then Jesus so graciously just he didn't let them go. He didn't say, you know what, I'm just so tired of you guys. You just keep messing up everything. So why don't you just go get in the boat and go have the storm, and I'm just gonna
No, but he did this all for them,
Mhm.
and when I wonder about why God does what he does, I always think of him in the role of a father. And wouldn't you, when your children are failing or making mistakes, and they're not getting what you're saying, don't you give them like a little bit of rope so they kind of see it? You give them that love so they finally get it. And Jesus did this all for them. He made the storm all for them. He did it all for them so that they would get it. It was like a second chance for them.
Second chance, third
Yeah.
chance, fourth chance, fifth chance.
Mhm.
That's the grace of God, and that's what we want. And that's because of Jesus Christ and what
Mhm.
he's done for us, that he can offer us that grace. So I hope you feel encouraged by that tonight. I'm just going to run over to the comments real quick. Christine just makes such a great comment. She says, so thankful for the grace he gives. I could not agree more. Susie's just given high fives all over the place.
Peggy too.
Peggy says, I stumble all the time. And he
draws me back to him. That's
draws me
beautiful.
back to him. And he's our bread of life for sure. Well, we hope that this has been an encouraging study. So grateful that you would join us on this Monday night. We try to do this every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time when we're able to, we're not working. So Lord willing, next Monday night we'll be back and we're going to just keep on trekking. When we pick up next week, don't miss it, because the people, the crowd now, not the disciples, but the multitude, they find them. Now they've been looking and they find them. And Jesus has the most profound things to say to these people.
Mm-hmm.
And their response to it is just jaw-dropping. Like, how could that have happened? So don't miss it. It's going to be life-changing. Thank you for joining us. If you're not part of our Facebook group, it's Bible Study Hub. You should join it if you're on Facebook. And then we always have our YouTube channel, Bible Study Hub. We put our edited videos kind of more in a good order, so they're easier to find. So we have like 200 and some videos of Bible studies. You're welcome to watch any of them you want, anytime. Until next week, then, have a great one, and thanks again for being with us.
Thank you so much for joining.
Bye.
Bye-bye.